Around the world, we see strange happenings that are just unexplainable to current science. These phenomena are happening on a daily basis. The curious and the brilliant alike continue to study topics of consciousness, UFOs, strange creatures, and strange lights all around us. What's it all about? Welcome to Beyond Humanity.
Impressed with Hessdalen itself because Hessdalen is really a UFO laboratory. It's a place where things are happening and where things can be studied.
Hi there, my name is Dave Scott, and tonight we're talking with Erling Strand, as he is one of the top researchers in the world when it comes to these beautiful lights that have lit up Hessdalen for centuries. Erling, welcome to Beyond Humanity.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Sir, for many people who may not understand what Hessdalen is and the miraculous sightings you are having there, what's it all about?
Well, it's a small valley in Norway, only 15 kilometers long, very small, very few inhabitants. Now it's a little bit more than 100. And in that small valley, there has been seen strange lights moving around, going down in the valley, up in the air, all strange movements, behavior, it looked like a lot of strange things. And well, it started back in 1981, when it started to be a huge amount of it. You can imagine small valley, 15 kilometers long, and suddenly there are more than 20 observations a week at the most. And people started wondering, what is these lights? What is it? And sometimes they come quite close. They could be close to the houses, could even illuminate inside the house when it moved outside the windows. And people was, well, a bit afraid in the beginning, because you can imagine sitting in your house out in the countryside, and suddenly there's a huge light passing through your house. That's strange.
I gotta ask you, what are people seeing?
They see much different things. Mostly it's lights. They can be blue lights, white light, flashing, lasting for some seconds only, or even less than a second. They can be strong flashes. And another type is balls of light with different shapes, sometimes round, sometimes oval shapes, and all other different kind of shapes too, which can move around down in the valley more than 1 hour. At the most, it has been seen close to 3 hours, but even some minutes anyway. And that was the type I saw the first time I was up there. It was a strong light illuminating the ground, in the middle of the night. The ground was illuminated, and it went on for more than 1 hour. And the stories, there has been more than several hundreds observations during the years. Well, it started late 1981 with this high activity. This high activity continued for 2 or 3 years. And then in late 1984, I think, it went down to a much lower activity level. Then it was about 20 observations a year. So, but still, 20 observations a year is quite a lot if you compare with the small valley and the strange things. I mentioned the balls of light and the flashing light. A third type is where you have more lights onto something. It seems to be, well, people have said a black object. These lights are connected. And this can move, all these lights move together. So it got the impression that they are connected to one phenomenon. That's a third type. And you have also the daylight observation, but that's more standard. That can be lights also, but also can be seen as objects. But the amount of that type is not so much. So we was a group that wanted to find out more about it. So we started what we called Project Hessdalen back in '83.
Erling, I have to ask you in regards to this fascinating topic, and I've seen video of this before previously, and I don't know whether it's extraterrestrial or not. We'll get into that just a little bit further on in the program here on Beyond Humanity. But for you, how did you first learn about these lights, and what drew your curiosity to wanting to study these nearly on a full-time basis?
Well, I was the newspaper in Norway did write much about it, and the news, and television, and so talked about it. And many people wanted to go up there to try to see it for themselves. I and some other friends went up there and went out in the mountainside in groups and saw this light. And that made a big impression on me. Then I knew it was real. At that time, I was working as a scientist, and when I went back to Oslo, about 400 kilometers from Hessdalen, I started to talk with my companions about this. And that say that, well, you shouldn't get involved in UFO topics. For a scientist, that's not good. But because at that time, in the beginning of the 80s, it was many people doing work with UFO topics was ridiculed around. Yeah. So, well, anyway, that made me more curious. And this high activity continued up in the valley, and no one did do any scientific research in finding out what it could be. And people asked about that, why don't that university, why doesn't that research facility do anything to try to find out? And then a group of us decided, well, maybe we should try. And that was back in summer 1983. And the light has been going on more than 1.5 years when we started this project. And we had our first field work in the winter of 1984, where a lot of people, about 40 participants, with instruments. We gathered instruments, we made a project plan, we got cooperation with both the military and some research facilities. They wanted to help us. That was very good. So we had quite a good setup with instruments up in the cabin back in 1984. And we managed to get a lot of data. And people can read about the findings in my technical report if they want in hessdalen.org or www.hessdalen.org. We got many observations. We had cameras, we had instrumentation, different kind of instrumentation, and got readings on several of those. We was lucky that the high activity continued while we were present with our instruments. So that was back in '84, and we decided to do a new fieldwork, 1985, even with more instruments, better equipped, more experience, everything. But sadly, that year we got that fieldwork, we got only one good observation. So it seems that the whole thing had gone down to a lower level. So that's, well, actually we stopped that project Hessdalen then because we thought it had all ended. But well, some years later, in the meantime, or after these fieldworks, I went on to different science conferences to present the data we had and asked if there was any idea of what it could be. So I got a network of some scientists who were interested in this topic. And when I started the Project Hessdalen Part 2, well, first of all, I was not alone, the first group of 5 people. But when I started the next one in 1993, that was because I was up in Hessdalen having a presentation for the inhabitants up there, and they wanted to know what had happened since we were up there and get all these results. Then they talked to me afterwards, the inhabitants in Hessdalen, and said it still continues. I was surprised, still continues. I haven't heard of this. And they said that, well, we don't tell it to anyone anymore because they were so much ridiculed the first time. You know, the press, television, there was laughing of the inhabitants. They were not nice to the people. So they shut up. They didn't want to tell it. But I thought, well, maybe we should start the project again. And at that time, I was working at the Seoul University College, and I involved my students in building an automatic station. So we have an automatic station up there running with cameras and so on, and running all the time. So and that was installed in 1998, and it has gathered a lot of data of it. And also, this topic itself, we have started and run since 2002 what we call science camp, where we bring young students up in Hessdalen Valley. They are split into groups up in the mountains with tents and communication equipment and instruments. And they stay there 1 week and looking for the strange light. And they do get sightings of the light. And we have an organized system with a headquarter and everything. So these young students think that's very exciting. And when they do see something as well, It's they are that's I like it very much, and that has been going on since 2002. They've been up there 1 week in September with the instruments, together with the teachers, and gather instruments. And all this, so there's several hundreds or maybe close to 1,000 students up there during the years. And that have the whole activity with the students, all the measurements we got, all the pictures, movies, and so on. So the phenomena is more accepted now as a real phenomenon, and that's good.
Erling, I would love to ask you, as a scientist who is very well versed now in this phenomenon over the years, going back to when you started to where you are now, how has the research changed in regards to the technology that you were using and the way you're able to study this phenomena now?
Well, the change has been in several parts. Well, first of all, the technical things. So the technology equipment is better now, although we haven't been able to buy the best equipment because that's expensive. But anyway, we have better equipment. But maybe the most important thing is that the attitude for such phenomena is changed dramatically. As I mentioned for you, in the early 80s, people was ridiculed. I was warned that I shouldn't start studying such phenomena because that was not good for a researcher, and etc. But the attitude in the community, in the society itself, it changed. So now it's much more easy. We have got it accepted. So it's much more easy to involve other scientists in taking part of this work and finding out what it can be. So we have good cooperation with some scientists from other countries now, which doing different kind of research in the valley itself to see if that they can come up with an answer on why Hessdalen, what's so specific with that valley. And that's one important question, of course.
In the 40 years that you have been studying this now, what advances have your studies made into trying to figure out what this phenomena is and where it's coming from?
Well, it's a very difficult thing because you have different types of description of the phenomena. We have different kinds of measurements. So it seems to be a variety of the phenomena. It doesn't need to be one solution. It can be several solutions. Well, anyway, it's hard to find a possible solution which cover all the different descriptions of the sightings. So it's it can be more easy if you split it into different, it could be different solutions. But of course, why does all these different things, if it is different, happen in the same place? So that's an idea that maybe it's the same thing anyway. So is it several things or is it one thing? That's we haven't got an answer to that yet. But anyway, if it's one thing, or you have all the different descriptions, all the different measurements. Some of it point to one direction, another thing point in another direction. So, for instance, we measured the speed of 30,000 kilometers an hour. 30,000, that's high speed, and there was no sound. If it was a solid object or anything, you should expect a sound, but it was no sound. And we have also the other thing, when we measure the optical spectrum, we get the continuous optical spectrum, which could indicate some solid object. It can indicate that. And also, if it is, this light can be a heat, very much heat. You can measure light and find out the temperature. And the pictures, movies we have with that shows a very high temperature. But when such lights are very close to people, closest some 30, 50 meters, or when this light comes down to snow and make tracks, there's no melting of the snow. No one has ever explained any warmth or heat from this light. So it seems to be cold, but some of the readings with the continuous spectrum could be indicate some heat. And sometimes it's recorded on radar. We can see the light recorded on radar. Sometimes the light is not recorded on radar. But sometimes also the radar detects some coming in the air, moving as strong reflection as a solid object. But nothing was seen. So it seems to be invisible, which was done during science camp in 2007. It started with strong flashes around on different places in the valley. Could come every 5 minutes. And when it is continued, the time between the different strong flashes become less and less. And when it had continued for nearly 40 minutes, and the time between the flashes become down to seconds, and then it was an outbreak of light. And it was recorded onto the video. And you can also see the pictures of this. So that was really great experience and great observations too. But I could mention that we had the radar also running all the time. The radar started to see something more than 1 hour, or nearly, I think it was close to 2 hours before these flashes started to show up. And after this outbreak, which I mentioned, no flashes was possible to see, but the radar continued to see it. So it was present, but we couldn't see it with our naked eyes. And after about 1 hour after this outbreak, the radar stopped recording. So it seems that the radar saw it first, and then it was visible with our eyes and so on. And the radar continued to see it a little bit, 1 hour, and then it disappeared completely.
I have to ask you, because the way you're painting a picture here, and from what I've seen on video, I'm actually trying to picture this in my mind, what it would be like seeing these incredible lights in the sky, Erling, because I've seen some pretty weird things, but something like these lights kind of moving around the sky, it would just be phenomenal for myself or anyone to actually have the chance to observe. My question to you is, if we ask Erling, not the scientist, but the curious side of Erling, do you believe this is something earthbound and created by Mother Earth? Or do you believe this phenomena is completely extraterrestrial?
It's a difficult question. I have chosen to mainly present the data which we gather. It's and I want to have enough data to, when we present an idea of what it could be, we have some background. And I would say that the amount of data or the type of data we need to have to come up with a conclusion must be good and solid. We have a lot of data which could indicate that and could indicate that and different kind of things, the whole aspect of different things. But I'm very I don't like to official state what it could be or what it could not be. I prefer to present the data, and people can make up their own thinking of what it could be.
Okay, but what is Erling, the young kid that's still inside Erling? What does he think it is? Is he hoping it's little gray aliens, or is he hoping that Star Trek is coming to fruition?
Well, for me, whatever it turns out to be is very exciting. Yeah, and it probably need to be something new. We have had physicists up there saying that, well, this must lead to new concepts in science, etc. We have to have a new knowledge of the science before when we study this and so on. Well, I have experienced a lot of different things myself. And I am a type which is sensitive, which some people are, and can see and feel more than the ordinary people. So I've seen a lot of such different kinds of things, not only Hessdalen, but other things as well. So I know there is a lot of new knowledge. Much of it is not yet accepted in the mainstream science. But there are scientists who study such different topics in all aspects which are not regular accepted, and got some interesting results too. So I want to mention a society which are called Society for Scientific Exploration. And I think many of those scientists who is part of that society have done a lot of interesting research of different topics. Well, back to the Hessdalen phenomena itself. It's I would say strange. It has even become more strange after we have studied this for many years. And the one strangeness is all the different topics, all the different descriptions of the phenomena, all the different, and sometimes also some which claim to be some kind of interactions. So you have all aspects of strange happenings. I've come to the conclusion you have to think probably outside the box to find a solution.
Erling, is there some sort of intelligence behind these lights?
Well, some few descriptions could indicate that. But of course, if you are going to prove intelligent, you have to prove very strong. The more strange a thing is, the more proof you need to have. And this is a strange thing. So if you want to have something, you want to prove something, which is very strange, that's very difficult. The variety, all the different descriptions, the different measurement, there's a lot of things. Intelligent, well, as I mentioned, it's hard to say. We have very few which could indicate that. For instance, the test we did with a laser beam, where there was a response flashing, we would use a red laser beam. And 1 week later, we got our red laser beam back to us on the snow. Some will claim that is intelligent behavior, but that it's hard to prove that. For some people, it can indicate some. So we'll say it's an intelligent behavior, but I think it's very, very difficult, or you should have to be careful in such conclusions. So I would say that generally spoken, most of the observation we have don't show any sign of any intelligence. And we have many hundreds observations. But of course, you have to define what is intelligent. What is that? And you have to, it's more philosophical questions, maybe. So when you say if it's proved to be intelligent, what do you mean by intelligent? Do you think as a person, a normal person, how a person would react, or can it be other things? So, well, I cannot answer your question.
Okay, well, let me rephrase this then. Never mind the intelligence portion of it. Has the data shown if and when this phenomena is going to happen? Have you been able to point it down that it's a spring through fall phenomena or a winter through summer phenomena?
Well, it's mostly observed when it's dark outside. And when, well, not only, but the most. And it's more dark in the wintertime because it's so far north. So it's longer nights in the wintertime. But also it seems that when the magnetic activity is in the atmosphere is strong, for instance, you can have sometimes magnetic storms, magnetic pulsations, and so on. It seems that the probability to see something is higher when such magnetic activity, high magnetic activity is present. We have also recorded some low frequency electromagnetic noise in a certain frequency range and so on, which shows up very often or very close to an observation. So that can also be some connection with some physical descriptions. And mostly such data is more easy to gather because, well, you record when this observation is happening, and you can record what other happenings in the atmosphere is taking place. And you have also, we have studied a lot of the geophysical properties and found some what we call interesting things in that. But from there, to saying that there is something unusual in the ground and connect that to the light is very difficult. It can be more speculation, of course, so far, but well, anyway, we have a lot of different data, and this is active. And it can indicate that there is. I would like to say what some researchers have said, that there must lead to new concepts in science.
I want to ask you, in regards to you mentioning that the phenomena is mostly seen at night, has this phenomena, whatever it is, been able to manipulate itself to have daylight encounters as well?
Yes. This light has been seen in the daytime too, and photographed on the day, in the daytime with strange shapes. We have, Hessdalen is a beautiful place, a lot of nice nature. Many people go up there to take pictures of the nature in the daytime, the mountains, the lakes, and everything. Very good. And some have managed to get some strange thing in one of their pictures. Can imagine they take many pictures around, and they look at the pictures afterwards, and there on one of those pictures you see something strange, and that has been, well, they didn't see it when they took picture, but they saw it after the picture was recorded. I have seen one type with my eyes, so I know it's possible to see also, if you are aware of course. But this strange picture in the daytime.
The skeptics out there may look at your data or look at the photos and say this looks like it's some sort of ultraviolet light manipulation, or maybe it's the cause of residue from solar flares. With where Hessdalen is, it's a lot further north on the planet. Can these be ruled out, that this is some sort of natural phenomena causing this?
Well, solar flares, we have, when it started back in 81, it could be connected to that, because solar flares is more active in some years. But the solar flares have on an 8-year cycle, but we didn't show any higher activity when the next solar flare was coming. But I should point out that we haven't studied all the different topics around the world with the solar flares and magnetic pulsation. There's a lot of different measurements going on of our ground, of course. There's a lot of data, and we haven't studied all these different data and compared it with where the light's happening. I could point out that there is not only in Hessdalen such thing is happening. I've been to both in Australia, and I've been to Mexico, and also some places in the States where there are some locations where higher activity of strange lights. And my impression is that we are talking about the same thing: behavior, how it is described, and so on. I think we are talking about the same thing, whatever it may be.
Can you predict through the data when this phenomena is going to happen?
No, I cannot do that. Other than I know that the probability to see something, see a phenomena, is higher when there is high magnetic activity in the atmosphere. We also know that, for instance, the small flashes, the strong blue and white flashes, the probability to see such kind of phenomena is a little bit higher when the humidity is higher and so on. So based on the different conditions on the ground, and we can say that the probability is a little bit higher, but we don't have enough knowledge to say that, well, tonight it will happen.
So in those other places around the world where you say the lights are being seen as well, do you think there is an interconnection between what's happening at Hessdalen and around the world comparatively to those being just separate incidents on their own as well due to climate or environmental setup or phenomena?
Well, I haven't seen any data from the other locations, and I don't know if it's been measured either. For instance, if there has been measuring magnetic activity and the weather conditions and so on the other locations. I haven't seen if that has been done, but that could be interesting, of course, to see if there's something in common. But the landscape, for instance, I mentioned the geophysicists who are doing research on the ground, the geophysics in the ground, the magnetical things and electrical things in the ground. And if there is similar findings, I mentioned a little bit of some some high magnetical locations, some places, and so on. If there is similar other places around the world, that could be interesting. But anyway, the topography can be quite different. For instance, out in Australia, it was in the desert, sand and so on. And Norway is in mountain and other places too. So it's, but anyway, I can say that there's a lot of study which can be done, but that costs money, of course. So, but if someone is willing to spend some funding for doing such research, we know there's a lot of energy in it. We know that the light could illuminate the ground for more than hours. So there must be some kind of energy. And where does that energy come from? What kind of energy is it?
I want to ask you in regards to Project Hessdalen. I mean, you started this in the early 90s in order to try and bring more scientific minded people in the community to come together and try and figure this out. Now that we're almost 30 years into Project Hessdalen, there's always good, there's always bad, and there's always accountability for it. How has this group grown and the strategies behind it grown to try and figure out what is strange about this entire phenomena?
Well, Project Hessdalen is not a big organization. It's a very small group, and we have very little funding. So most of us have our full-time work besides. So we don't manage to use many hours in working with this topic. So it's not a full-time work. But we try to do what we can during our ordinary time where we can do it, ordinary free time. So, but anyway, it's really interesting.
Okay, let's shift gears here for a second, because a lot of time when there is strange phenomena over here in North America, one way or another, the military seems to get involved. Has the military ever investigated or been in contact with you regarding the Hessdalen lights?
Oh, yes. Well, actually, we went to the military, the first field work, because, and they was interested. They was really interested in what we was doing. And they helped us too, by instruments and the knowledge and so on. And also some field work out in the field during our field works back in 84 and 85. So we got involved with the military, yes. But it was we who took the contact the first time. And they was very interested. Yes.
Have other militaries outside of the Norwegian been interested in this?
Well, yes, I got the impression, even if it hasn't gone through to me directly, but I wrote a report and I got the Norwegian military cooperate with the military abroad, in the States and so on. That's common. And they said that the military in the States was interested in our findings. So they got a lot of copies of my report.
Have there been any phenomena, Erling, that have, maybe shooting lasers or something into this phenomena that have gained a reaction or response?
Yes, we did test that during our first field work. We used a laser beam, not strong, ordinary red laser, pointing towards a flashing light, and the flashing frequency doubled. And we did that test for totally 9 times, and in 8 of those 9 times, the frequency doubled. That was a little bit surprised for us, because the reason why we did that test was some people had done tests with pointing heavy light, ordinary car light or similar, pointing towards a light, and they said it disappeared when it did so. So we expected that it could disappear, but it didn't. It just doubled the frequency. We used a red laser, and during it was 1 week actually, 1 week after our test, that we got a red beam or red light on the snow just in front of us, where we were standing, moving in the snow, lasting only seconds. And it seems to be the same type of light if you use a laser beam pointing down in the snow, illuminating very much around the main spot. That happened 1 week later. But of course, we cannot say that this is any connection, but it was strange.
With everything that's going on and people gaining interest in this, the beautiful part of the technological age that we're in and the internet age that we're in is your information is easier to find. Where can people go to see these photographs and to find more information about your studies?
I have a website, www.hessdalen with 2 S's, hessdalen.org. And I normally put all the results in there, all the pictures from the automatic stations, and so on, which continue to go in. So there is a good place. And also many of the descriptions of ordinary people telling about it. The strange lights, from those who takes pictures in the nature and see this light. They have put them out on the website as well, so people can look at those different pictures. Could also mention that some of the pictures show a stream of light, and that is due to the long exposure time. They use camera to stay on tripod with a long exposure time up to 30 seconds. And during the exposure time, the light has been moving, and then you got this stream of light on the pictures. So,
Erling, I want to say thank you so much for coming on Beyond Humanity and being a part of this and detailing in depth your information that you have found. Continued success to you and your research crew on the Hessdalen lights.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be a guest by you.
Thank you. And the honor is really all ours. Once again, everybody, Beyond Humanity can be found at uapresearch.com. You can find us on YouTube as well at UAP Research, as well as on Twitter at UAP Research as well. Myself, Dave Scott, you can find me at spacedoutradio.com and on Twitter at spacedoutradio.